Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to the last session. We are going to talk about connecting applications using BizTalk ESB Toolkit. Before I start, wanted to find out how many people are BizTalk users or know how to use BizTalk? Awesome. How many people have tried ESB Guidance or ESB Toolkit? OK, that's very good. So this is actually the right mix of audience. We wanted audience that know about BizTalk and wanted to learn about ESB Toolkit. So my name is Syed Rashid. I'm the Senior Product Manager on BizTalk team. With me today is Dmitry Ospov. Dmitry, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Principal Program Manager. I'm with Patterns and Practices team. And I was PM and architect and to some degree dev on ESB Toolkit. So I'm very pleased to be here so we can show you what we have done, as now it is fully supported by our BizTalk team.
Cool.
But it's a good opportunity to have and show you and express how we were thinking about this and why is it good to use now and what's a big feature around these concepts.
All right. Thanks. So basically, our agenda is very briefly, we recap the application integration challenges. We'll make an introduction of BizTalk ESB Toolkit components and its architecture and how it lays over the BizTalk architecture. And then basically, we will drill down into each component. We have lots of demos to show. I think we'll try to shoot for 5 demos to walk you through the itinerary designer, content-based routing, resolver, and you may not know what resolver is, but you will know by that time, an extensibility scenario on how you can extend ESB Toolkit. Because one of the key things with ESB Toolkit is it was designed so that you could actually, hey, if you don't like something, you can just take that out and plug it in with your own custom component. So it's very modular in that nature. And then basically, we will end up with the ESB, with a summary. Before I start, does everybody know what ESB stands for? Which what? Aeroness Spaghetti Bus. Awesome. Anybody else? I heard the most broadest definition I've heard is Enterprise Silver Bullet, because it solves all integration problems. So anyway, let's start with the integration challenge. One of the key things is creating point-to-point integration, connecting applications together in a point-to-point manner is just, yes, people have done it, but it also is a big inhibitor. If in people, we have heard about business agility. Hey, IT is not responding to my changing business need as fast as could. And one of the key reasons is the point-to-point integration techniques. But the main thing is, you look at it, hey, why is that? Why is that is the case? That is one of the key cases is because the way we actually build services, like in previous slide, all these things actually I represent. Oracle has its own service. SAP has its own web services or services interface. These services actually contain a lot of logic about what is the order of these services to be called, what endpoints I need to go to. Well, if those endpoint locations change, then your service break, and things like that. There is also a lot of logic about data transformation. How do I map from one format to the other format? This is also included in the service logic itself. So the idea is, look, if agility is achieved through a service composability, well, how do you actually make your service highly composable, highly reusable? One of the key things is, well, why don't you actually take some of these 6 things that I have mentioned there and delegate it to a middle tier or intermediate tier layer so that it takes care of these things and your service really focus on the business logic. And that way you are going to actually come up with a service that's highly reusable that could participate in service composition, yet that's how it gives you the agility that you're seeking. So in that sense, we have BizTalk server that actually provides a lot of these capabilities for routing, for transformation, for process orchestration, and protocol adaptation. ESB Toolkit really leverages BizTalk capabilities and add a layer of declarative framework on top, so that instead of a lot of design time decisions that you make in BizTalk at design time, at develop time, and in order to change it, you need to recompile or reconfigure the component, you can do it at runtime. And that's the key thing. ESB Toolkit is basically adds a bunch of frameworks and tools so that your environment is a lot more conducive to dynamic nature of service orientation service-oriented requirements. So basically, if you think about it, what do we have in ESB Toolkit? We have two, think about, we use the term on-ramp and off-ramp. It's like receive port and send port. And usually on off-ramp side, that's the service provider. On the on-ramp side is the service requester or service consumer. And basically, when it sends the message, one of the key concepts in ESB Toolkit is the concept of routing slip. So basically, it sends the message, and with the message, it sends an itinerary or a routing slip, which basically says, OK, here is the instruction on how to process this message. And basically, we use that routing slip to then resolve all the transformation information and things like that, and process the message for you. All right. So and then one of the other things that we have done with ESB Toolkit is we have exposed a lot of BizTalk capabilities directly to an outside client or consumer. So things like transform service. Bala was mentioning about transformation engine in BizTalk. Well, a lot of people want to use it. And right now, if they want to use it without using BizTalk, they had no other way to do, it was not available. Well, with transformation services in ESB Toolkit, we actually provide an external interface to gain access to transform engine. So if you want to send a message and just do transform and get back the request, that you can do. Similarly, you can do the same thing for resolving. So if you want to just send a request for endpoint resolution and just get back the response, you can do that. So we have exposed a lot of capabilities with ESB Toolkit out to the other environment. So how does key components of ESB Toolkit? Most of you guys are pretty familiar with the BizTalk component that's actually on the bottom on the slide here. So what does ESB Toolkit actually adds? It adds on-ramp and off-ramps. Basically, these are the mechanisms for ESB to basically receive and send messages to messages. Management portal, basically that's a centralized portal that will show you the demo that gives you information about messages, which messages have failed, how many, why they have failed. In fact, actually gives you the ability to repair messages and resubmit them. So that's a management portal. The other thing, core services, web services, is basically what I just mentioned in the previous slide. It exposes a lot of functionality like transform service, UDDI service, and things like that to external service clients so that they can consume if they don't want to go use the full ESB infrastructure. So that's the top three. The core, what we call, is basically three things. Itinerary service. Itinerary service is one of the core components in ESB Toolkit that basically acts on the message. So it acts on the itinerary itself. Itinerary contains the instruction on how to process the message. It acts on those steps. Resolvers Resolver is a mechanism by which actually itinerary service collects all the configuration environment that it needs to process the message. Things like which transform map to use, and things, and basically we are going to actually show you the demo of this. Adapter provider is actually used again by itinerary service when it basically communicates with the external system. Basically, what adapter provider does, it actually sets up the parameters for BizTalk adapters to talk to their system. So basically, BizTalk adapters need basically configuration information that needs to be filled out. Adapter provider actually fills that information. So it is not a different adapter provider than, or it's not extra. It's basically BizTalk adapters, and it basically is the mechanism by which we actually fill up all the parameter and configuration environment for this. And in the end is the exception management capability. Basically, it gives you a capability to monitor the status of your message process. So basically, as you are processing the message, you know what type of alerts is going on, if there's an exception is happening, and it records all of that in a store. So if I go to the next slide, and this slide is always makes, the animation on this slide just throws me off a little bit, so please excuse me if I make mistake. Pretty familiar with BizTalk architecture. You have send ports, you have receive ports, you have the pub sub engine, your orchestration engine, transformation rules engine. On-ramps and off-ramps are basically type of receive and send ports. And then basically the ESB core toolkit, which is made up of itinerary service, resolver, adapter provider, and exception management components. And one of the key areas here is actually we allow you to do all of those things, basically allow you to actually inject itinerary service, transform service, get configuration information through resolver, set up adapter parameters, while the message is in pipeline. And this is actually one of the key advantages of ESB Toolkit. So, and I think Dimitri is going to explain this a little bit better. Oh, sorry. And then obviously these are the drill downs on different components within those things. Then obviously you have itinerary store. So as message arrive, either the itinerary slips comes in the SOAP header, or if it doesn't come in the SOAP header, basically the itinerary service use a resolver mechanism to find the right itinerary for that message from the itinerary store, so it gets attached before any processing begins on the message itself. And obviously, then when it gets ready to publish, it goes to the send port. If anything goes wrong during this processing, obviously you have an exception management framework that basically records the exceptions in the exception management store. And then we have the entire ESB management portal that runs off that store. And it generates reports, alerts, and things like that. And then we talked about the core services. These are the services that we basically expose to. These are the ESB BizTalk services or ESB Toolkit services that we get exposed to other service client that want to use it. Hey, somebody who just wants to use the UDDI service to look up something, or somebody who just wants to use the mapping or transformation service. So that's how ESB Toolkit architecture is mapped onto the BizTalk server. So as you can see, this is pretty much built on top of the BizTalk server. So with that, I want to give it over to Dimitri, and he'll walk you through the rest of the presentation.
Yeah, and Syed is going to ask me questions just to make sure that you will know what we're doing. And then, so before we go to details, and we have a lot of demos, so we will try to do it pretty fast. If we forget about the previous slide, what is Toolkit is all about? It is all about specifying a policy that allows you to glue components, silo components, which we call itinerary services. And then once you develop a finite set of these components, like routing, transform, validation, maybe others, you can declaratively plug them within the policy, and that policy travels with the message in the message context. Now, the good thing about it that your message can be transformed by, let's say, a transformation service, and then you have the same itinerary and routing sleep, just saying transform is done. You can figure out where to route the message. And for that reason, we provide resolvers. So as you hit routing service, you can say, hey, I want to have additional context from UDDI, BRE, and so on, and get those routing properties that we populate in the message context, and then we let BizTalk route message using dynamic sendports. And then to populate this context, of course, we use adapter providers, because those are the components that are fairly simple and mostly declarative, but we allow you have full of control how you interpret the context that's coming from resolvers. And within itinerary service, if it is routing service, call adapter provider, so these properties are populated in the context. So first of all, we should just go and warm up with the little demo. And what we have here is itinerary designer. And on the first demo, we have pretty rudimentary sample. We receive the message, and the goal is to route the message using BRE using file adapter to a certain location. So what do we do here? We receive the message, and within designer, you specify what we call on-ramp and map it to receive port. So we validate all the receive locations associated with this port to know that they can actually configure to process this message. And then the first step is a routing step, which is a service, a messaging. And what we have here is we said that this service is in container receive message, receive and mount, so it appears in the receive handler. So the tendency is pretty simple. We have handlers that are matching pipelines, receive handler, receive pipeline, and send handler, send pipeline. It is on the receive side. And of course, if we go to off-ramp, it's going to be reversed. So we send the message first and then receive. So the result of this operation is going to be this policy, which I call simple route. And it's that simple. So we have one-to-one transport type file, and then we specify where message is going to be routed. So now this itinerary, as I had said, if you click on the model elements, is named simple route. It has version 1.0, and it is exported into the runtime store. So essentially what we need to do is try to actually submit it and see what's going to happen. So I already have it. So let's just submit it. It is submitted. And then we can notice here that it's submitted with this GUID. And what this GUID does is allowing you to submit message in one of three ways that we discuss later. But when you submit, as you noticed here, we define itinerary name as a policy. We selected message, and it was just name of the itinerary. So we basically said, OK, execute simple route. It's just a name, like zebra. And then we pre-generated itinerary unique identifier, which is basically tracking GUID. So what we can do is just copy this GUID. Go back here and try to paste this GUID to one of the services that we shipped in itinerary portal that we talk about later. And now you see what happened with this itinerary in BAM and what this service provides. It is part of our portal sample that we go later. Is a tracking which services to execute. So what can you see? Well, service business name was route message. Itinerary was simple route. Version was 1.0. We executed. And then on the second one, we invoked send port. Message direction was send transmit. Invoke send port was logical name. And then after that, service is completed, and itinerary state is completed. So
basically, we turned the tracking on when we ran this.
So for 48, this is the message that appeared, and that's my message. So I hit it, I got it, I can track it, and the result of this itinerary is XML. Now, from that XML, when we call itinerary services, there is no single hard-coded type to component that we invoke. So going back to this demo, let me close this one and open the second one. We actually tried very hard to make as many demos as possible. So at the point when I was about to say, I just modified the message, we figured out it takes 3 additional minutes. And we decided to probably squeeze one demo. So I'm just showing you a second version of that itinerary that we did. And now you see we have additional step and additional service called transform. So what we're going to here is transforming, and its type of messaging. So it's executed, as you noticed, as a receive pipeline. And then the map is the static map that you can actually easily browse. So, and we show, as you see, all possible maps that we have for all BizTalk applications for you to choose. And itinerary, again, exported in the database. And it's called simple transform route. So version 1.0, status is deployed. So what we're going to do is go back here. And what's going to change is we just paste new name of the itinerary, submit, message processed, 452. So and a transformed message to Canadian services. So if I open previous one, just in case if you don't trust me, and you think I'm Mickey Mousing, you will see that the first one actually was North American. So I just added one transformation. We intercepted message in the pipeline. We executed 2 steps, one transform, one route. Transformed, called the adapter provider, populated the message, invoked send port dynamically, and you have it. 0 coding. Now, obviously, this is a very cool scenario in current BizTalk because, you know, if you want to execute, let's say, 3-4 straight transformations in a row, right? So you want to receive the message, you want to transform it to canonical format, then you need to figure out where to route it using BRE or something. And then based on that, you may transform it again once you figure out where you're routing it. So you may have 3 or 4 transforms. So it is harder to do with BizTalk than you can do here, as the product is today. So we're helping to make it a little bit better. So now, if we're going back to the slides. So very quick about itinerary services. First type of the service, which can be long-running service, is orchestration. And these orchestrations are activated via orchestration subscription. So there is nothing new. It's just standard BizTalk. But the core idea is a message comes in, and it has a routing slip with the content of itinerary. And then potentially we can call a resolver if we need to. to resolve additional artifact. Can be map, can be endpoint, whatever you want. Then, if it's routing service, we call adapter provider. And then, as a result of executing the service, we can do many things. So first of all, we can send multiple messages and potentially clone existing message. So you submitted one, you need to send to 2 locations. You can use orchestration to clone it, and you'll have 2 messages with the same itinerary. Very nice. So we do support this scenario in the pipeline as well. Now, what orchestrations are good for as being plugged as itinerary services is doing complex messaging patterns. So one of the examples that I always introduce is scatter-gather. So you received a request, you transformed it, and then you need to execute a generic orchestration that figures out what are multiple endpoints to call, transform message, send it, route to that endpoint, receive request, transforms back, and then aggregate all the responses, and then advances. So let's say you want to bid for, I don't know, delivery of PO order line, and you get the better price. So in that case, this service can be assembled as part of the itinerary. It can be fairly reusable and parameterized as a service, which we'll show you later. And then you can plug it and use it. The messaging is pretty much the same scenario. Message comes with the routing slip. And then we intercept the message and call multiple messaging services that can also call resolvers or adapter providers. So one of the examples I just showed you was transform and route, which we executed in receive pipeline. But you also can do it in pretty much on-ramps and off-ramps in different directions. Also in 2.0, once we intercept the message, of course, we need to figure out which service can be executed at a certain stage based on where it is executing, on receive side, send side, on-ramp, off-ramp. So for that reason, we have added support for the restriction in itinerary as a policy. We call it strict mode. So you can actually restrict when you want to move on and do not execute a certain service. An example for that, you're receiving the message, you attach the itinerary to it, and then let's say you want to do transform on send, and then it's two-way scenario. You want to receive response, transform again. So essentially, in that case, this restriction will apply because one transform will be applied before you send the message out to somebody. And once you get response from that person or that service, then you apply transform again in another direction because you need to transform and move on. So very quick, we have different kind of resolvers. And the reason we made the decision to add more resolvers is to give you powers to add additional context for routing or resolving any artifact. So the most important one is UDDI 3.0. And then we added itinerary resolution as well using BRE. And I will show you some of it very shortly. So adapter providers, this is what we support out of the box. Most notably, we do support WCF custom. So essentially, you can configure your binding using WCF custom adapter and send it using SQL, which is part of LOB SDK. And it will be all declarative in the policy. So very quick on the modeling. I showed you designer, so I just wanted to talk a little bit what it's actually doing underneath. So when you see all these nice boxes, it is actually DSL model. And these are vanilla services and vanilla resolvers that we define in DSL, and model is pretty generic. Now, the real power comes when you actually choose what we call extender. And that's pluggable component that is not part of the DSL model. It is a component that you can also write to add additional experience. For example, you want to have SFTP transport, which somebody in community already did, as well as MSMQ. So writing that particular support and supporting additional adapter for extender is about 25 lines of code, tops, and then one XML file, and then you can feed that extender to gather additional information for, let's say, adapter or resolver, and we talk about it in a little bit. Now, on the bottom, after you add the core DSL and you add extenders to capture the technology elements, you generate runtime model, which is XML. There is no code involved. It's XML. So essentially, it is interpreted language, if you wish, high-level language that says, OK, I'm going to invoke this service, then this service, then this service. And also keep in mind that since that itinerary XML is in routing sleep, it can change at any time. So you can have one flow, then you can flip it to another flow, and the third flow, and the fourth flow. So you can actually partition these flows to a certain level of degree that they're simple, short, and you can deal very well with complexity. So we talked about submitting. So just very quick, because I really wanted to show demos, and you can see it in documentation. So we support legacy mode, where you send the whole itinerary. We support submission of just itinerary as a policy name, and we resolve it. And then you can send just a message, and we can locate itinerary on the server side. And it can be done using different types of selection, either static or BRE, and it's completely open model to write your own. So in that case, once you submit just a message, what's going to happen is we will export XML, and then we intercept the message in a pipeline, and in component called itinerary selector, we just load it, and we will hit interceptor component that will run all our services. In our case, it was transform and route, and then it will move on. So now, we talked about resolvers and adapter providers, and I think it would be nice to see a little demo. So first of all, what we're going to do is to look at 3 different types of resolution. And then the question is, OK, I mean, it's so nice, vanilla DSL model, and you can show me different things. But if I'm resolving something, how I'm going to test it? Moreover, how I can test it and verify that I'm actually resolving something meaningful from different environment. So what we have done is added UDDI3 resolver. So, and in this case, as you see, this is UDDI3. And we have a service, and we have an endpoint. And that nice endpoint in our case binding, if we will be patient and scroll, we see that we published it, and this is this guy. So it's UDDI3 publisher key, which is a nice addition. And to resolve this particular binding, we have a bunch of data, and we have a bunch of categories. So in this case, you can add any categorization schema you want. And in our case, we just added ours. So I want to pay attention to is, let's say, port name. So now, we have routing service. And this model is, of course, invalid. But if you look on the right side, we have binding key, which I just showed you. So if we're going to do something meaningful, then, of course, we need to test it. And as you see, we just hit UDI from just resolver surface. And that was the port name, right, that I just showed you. So essentially, you can point from the designer to any environment as you're designing. It can be production as well, if you have right credentials. And then you can hit resolver, which is actually query. Resolver doesn't modify anything. And then as you design, you can verify that you actually have correct data. So It's all nice and dandy with binding key, but then, of course, true UDDI requires category search. So what we have done here is we configured resolver again, and we use category search. And you see here, we use search qualifiers. And then what you can do is to pretty much go and define anything you want. So it can be more than one key value pair, which is going to be category, key, and the value. In our case, it is a port name. And it happens that I always have one. And we hit it again. This is correct, right? Maybe I can get some claps. No? All right. So with UDDI, it's all cool. Now, what are we going to do if we want to use BRE? So we have this policy, route order, as you see here. And that policy is actually pretty easy. So there is a custom order where we say if request type is greater than 10, we move it, in this case, file location. But the one thing to watch for, we have custom here. So everything for request type is greater than 10 supposed to be custom order. And otherwise, it's going to be default, right? So pretty simple, rudimentary rule. But you also notice that the rule actually have XPath, and it's based on the contents of the message, right? So I'm looking for actually a request type. OK? So all good. Now, what I did is I configured resolver again. And in our case, it's going to be custom order. And you see request type is 11. So essentially, it's supposed to be custom. So what are we going to do now is do the pretty much same thing. Maybe I can ask for claps later, right? So this is what we did. We just called our resolver service that Ed was talked about, passed right credentials, got context of the model, hit the BRE, and now we got back a set of properties that allow us to verify or use that to route message. Keep in mind that if you want to route by yourself, you also can, because resolver service and transformation service are decoupled from BizTalk and used on demand. But of course, the real power is do it using dynamic ports. All right. So we have more demos to go. Very quick. When we were building ESB Toolkit, we wanted to make very clear that it's all pattern-based. And we wanted to verify that you can actually build patterns that we have here using ESB Toolkit. So I just listed them there. Most of them are patterns from Gregor's book, which I think most of you are aware, enterprise integration patterns. So we're not mimicking our own patterns, because that's not the right thing to do. But these are real integration patterns that were used a long time ago, and we can actually do them. So very quick, we have content-based router, and we have just like I showed you with the policy. And you can use routing service with resolver to specify where to resolve the message based on the content.
Actually, isn't it previous example that BRE with
Yeah.
looking at type, it basically looked at that content and dropped it at different locations, right?
Yeah, so that was the policy that I just showed you. So that was content-based router. Now we can probably go to something more sophisticated.
You have to switch.
So this is, I know it's big,
you have to switch.
So I'll try to do as much as possible to scroll it. But here is the scenario. So scenario is I'm receiving message through receive port, and it can come from two receive locations. One is, let's say, SMX, and another WCF. And what I need to do is to figure out, based on the name of the location or any context property, I want to explicitly switch where message is supposed to go. Now, all these services that I have are running in the receive pipeline. So essentially, I have conditional flow in the receive pipeline that I specify in this itinerary. And to achieve that, we have this very nice guy that we have in Toolbox. We call it broker service. And it's based, of course, using resolver, because we need to get message context to figure out what we can do. And then, as you see, there are two ports and the filters. And the filter is XPath filter, where we basically check if we received where we received the message from. And in BizTalk context property, we're going to have receive location name. In our case, on ramp itinerary, WCF. So is other is simply true. So analog of this is switch. If we received it from this receive location, we route here or here. And to define that in order, we use filter, and we use resolver, and we use order on the port. So essentially, it's analog to switch construct. So then after that, we just send it to different location. That's pretty much it. So we can get conditional routing. And we can plug it here. Right. And we execute. And let's see what's going to happen to it. All right. So I did submit through WCF. So let's verify. We got conditional routing, invoke when WCF, switch context, and then route when WCF was the third service. So I just run the whole itinerary that I just showed you, and I hit route when WCF. And the message is stored in the file location here. Please notice route one WCF and invoke then WCF. So in the bump tracking I just showed you, I took that path. Okay. So is that something I cannot get collapse? You get conditional routing and pipelines. It's not provided out of the box. OK, so we're trying to, we have a couple of more demos. And the one that we really want to show is exception management portal. So we do provide exception management framework out of the box. And the reason for that is if something bad happens, you should be able to fix the problem and, of course, figure out how to fix it. So the tricky part is that if something fails, you potentially need to resubmit the message after problem is fixed. So once you cannot route message or something bad happens in your orchestration, the best way to deal with it, if orchestration doesn't know what to do, is externalize the message. Then, as you externalize the message using our exception management framework, we do receive the message in separate database. We can send alert to you based on the message properties. You can look through the message. You can resubmit message back, assuming you define a handler, and receive location where a message should be resubmitted. So to OK. So to deal with that, what we can show you is exception management portal. So at the home page, you see breakdown applications, and then you can see breakdown by faults, and then you can see the resubmissions, and you can see all the recent exceptions, and you can change it per hour, per month, and then you can also drill down, export in Excel, and you see if you drill down through the charts, which are MS charts, you can drill down by each different types of exception. Now, what we have here is a set of faults, and these are the faults that happened and got externalized, and you can catch every fault. One you generate using our exception management framework and orchestration, 5 lines of code. We also catch pretty much every message on the send and receive ports where failed routing, BizTalk failed routing is enabled and will be stored here. So essentially, what you can do here is track health of your applications, send alerts that you can specify for a particular type of fault, and resubmit messages. So what we try to do now, if time permits, we quickly go to exception handling. And submit a couple of messages. And the scenario is I'm submitting an order, and one of the messages has, it's a standard sample we ship. One of the messages has divide by 0 unit price that, calls cause of divide by 0 exception. And one message is going to be processed, OK, and another one is not going to be. So what we'll try to do is fix the message and resubmit it. So exception handler can actually deal with it. So we got the message, and exception was construct fault. So pick it up. Now the good thing here is we have 2 messages. One was approve request, one deny request, because when our orchestration failed, we actually have powers to attach multiple messages to the fault. You want 3 messages, 5 messages, 4 messages. You can attach it and then choose the one you want to resubmit. So now, let's say we hit the one where we need to fix approve. You see unit price 0. Now, the good thing that we have all the context properties, which are normally not very visible. And you can see them in a portal. So what we'll try to do is edit the message. Add the unit price 101, and then resubmit it to the handler, which we recognize. OK. So message got resubmitted. So now all we need to do is wait when it comes. And if everything got everything correctly, 518. Unit price 101. So also you can wrap the fault in XPath. Oh, sorry, InfoPath. I'm too focused on XPath probably because I wrote that one here. So to InfoPath form, and then route the message to SharePoint using WSS adapter. Also, one of our colleagues from Microsoft published adapter provider and the manifest file for SharePoint adapter, WSS adapter. So you can just compile 32 lines of code, add one XML file, and copy it to Designer, and you will be able to use SharePoint adapter. So you can wrap message in InfoPath, route it to SharePoint, and let SharePoint to deal with it and then resubmit it back. So just to summarize, so not only we store the metrics and use reporting, we also record in BOM. So you can get a sense of BOM data on your exceptions and health of BizTalk applications. We do allow alerts. We do allow audit trails. We do provide RESTful services to query that data. So all you need to do is flow credentials. And if you need to resubmit more than one message, so you have heavy traffic, you can still use the backend services that Portal consumes to do that resubmission. So we do provide historical views, and we provide exception management framework, of course, to make it possible, and infrastructure. So we already went to the portal, and then very quick, because we have about 10 minutes left, is about extensibility. So extensibility is something that, believe me, we thought very hard about. And when we actually were doing Toolkit, for every feature we added, we actually were spiking on extensibility at the same time. So these are the extension points that we can give you. So first one, as I already mentioned, and 2 adapter providers are available on the blogs. One is for MOS, it's WSS adapter. Another one, MSMQ. So you can just search, clip the code. It's 32 lines of code on average, 1 XML file for the designer, and all the instructions that can get you up in probably 30 minutes for using these adapters. Orchestration services are actually more natural extension. But again, you need to use power of long-running processes. And it makes sense when you do complex messaging. So you have persistent points. So you can assemble your orchestration as part of the itinerary to take care about this as multiple units of work and either fail or move on. So messaging services, you need to implement one interface. It's very easy to add and register. And we also noticed that writing messaging services is easier to writing pipeline components. Moreover, you have more flexibility, because as I showed you with transform and route, you can actually sequence what you do in pipeline. And that's what sometimes people want to do, because they want to do all or no processing, which pipeline gives you. Resolver, you can write as many resolvers as you wish. And then you can write composites. And we provide in documentation how you can use what mygroup ships, Unity application block, to actually create your dependency injection container so you can reuse part of your resolver. And then most important, caching and configuration use enterprise library. So essentially, they're declarative and used by name. So you can use a memory cache if you want to later, add velocity cache. That doesn't affect us. We can just define another caching manager. And we have absolutely 0 hard-coded reference to caching implementation. So these are logical APIs that Antly provides. We just call cache manager. And these can be parameterized in components that we provide. So very quick on extensibility, because we don't have much time.
We have 5 minutes.
So then I will take 1 minute. Otherwise, Syed and I are not going to have a good conversation after this. So we need to keep everybody happy. So very quick. Here is a resolver that I wanted to create. And the reason for that is I wanted to create new resolver. And after that, I wanted to define 2 properties. As you see here, some resolver value and version. And I want to see it on designer surface. So this is pretty much the code that you need to write to get this extender for your resolver so you can see it on design surface. So that's it. If we cut the usings. And then another one is even simpler. That's pretty much your base extender. And what we're going to do now, very quick, is we can open extensibility itinerary. So we see here custom resolver. So I copied this extender into runtime tools. And this is the sample extension. So you see we have LDAP, BRE, and so on, right? XPath. So this is my code that I just compiled and copied over. There was no change on the designer. You see I have some resolver value inversion. And if now I export, now actually I can prove that we have the validation. And the itinerary is actually XML file. So now, there you go. So you can define any data for your resolver, any type of resolution. It will be part of your policy, export it, and then resolver component can be used to resolve whatever you want in the universe. So, and on that note, I'm very happy to give it back to Syed.
Cool. Thanks, Dimitri. So hopefully, after all those demos, if you're going to use BizTalk, you're going to use it with the ESB toolkit. So basically, just to recap, some of the mediation challenges we talked about on how to make services more reusable, so that it could be used more efficiently. These are some of the challenges. And my colleague, who's actually loves animation, and he animated every one of the line. Basically, we have, with ESB Toolkit, we provide a resolution or a way to actually meet those challenges that you find in service composition. Again, the whole purpose of ESB Toolkit is to give you a way to build highly reusable services. And that's the key point if you want to walk away here, is basically take a lot of these challenges, that make services not very reusable. Things like some of the mediation challenges, endpoint resolution, transformation, things like that. Leave it up to the ESB to handle that. You build basically business logic in your service, and then reuse it and combine it and build composite services out of that. And obviously, lower operational cost with the management portal, with the way we actually provide you a mechanism to take a look at all your messages, be able to actually drill down on them, be able to actually resubmit and fix those. I think that's really, if as a BizTalk, like I was telling Dimitri, that he may not get claps on every one of his demo. He will get claps on the management portal demo, and he got it without asking for it. So I think that's really, really cool. And obviously, the third key point is the cost of change. Basically, with ESB Toolkit, basically our design goal was, hey, if things change, you should be able to adopt those change with just going into things and just changing the configurations and things like that, and be able to actually adopt that change. And that, I think, hopefully we were able to show you that with itineraries, and the way we actually, you can create resolvers to actually collect configuration information, and how do we actually populate adapter configuration parameters for adapters and things like that. We really make it a very, very easy for you to actually build things, build connections, but in service-oriented world, your requirements will change, and you should be able to change as fast as you can. So these are basically the key. Oh, am I going backwards? So call to action. We have the ESB training in a box DVD sets at our booth. So please, if you're interested, pick them up. They have full instructor-led training. They have VPCs loaded on them. They have all the hands-on labs. So if you want to become an expert at your own pace, you can do that. Actually, those DVDs are available, as well as BizTalk booth is not very easy to find. So that's another your to-do. Try to find BizTalk booth. So
Yeah, I can give you very easy directions. Look for PNP and then go around. And we'll be in either of those, me at least.
actually,
So
at least I put a poster. Hopefully, nobody has taken it down. So I put a poster there to help you find the thing. You can also find a lot of information on the MSDN portal, on the Developer Center, on this hands-on lab, as well as the sample applications. Full documentation is all available there. And basically, that's it. Hopefully, you like this session. Obviously, MCS also has some service offering, as well as our partners that have service offering. Another cool thing, one of our partners have given us some training requests. So it's 5 days of their hands-on offering, basically 5 days of their online training that if you want to pick it up, we have some of the cards available for those, so you can come and pick that up. As well as come and talk to us at ESB as the BizTalk booth. Give us your feedback. Those are really, really important. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Oh.